so Austria and Prussia.
Russia? Prussia. Is that Russia before they took away the...
No, Prussia and Russia are in no way related. They are separate entities. Do not get them confused. Prussia and Russia are separate. Okay, so we start with the 30 Years' War, which is a religious war. It's a war between the Protestants and the Catholics. I know it sounds like you've heard all this before, and that's because you have. Same story, different war. Okay, the Protestants and the Catholics. So on one side, we have Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden. He is the Protestant primary general. He is the king of Sweden. He is their major military leader, and he will be responsible for pushing the other side back. Who is the other side? The Habsburgs of Austria and Spain. They are the Catholic side. So Gustavus Adolphus is leading the Swedish troops and the German Protestants from northern Germany. Southern Germany tends to be Catholic. Okay? Basically what the Habsburgs are doing in the 30 Years' War is they want to undo the Protestant Reformation. They want to turn the clock back and literally undo the Protestant Reformation by force. Well, your two sides, the Swedes and the northern German princes versus the Austrians with some assistance from Spain, battle and battle and battle. Most of the fighting takes place on the plains of northern Germany, okay, up by the Baltic Sea. In southern Germany, a lot of river valleys, deep river valleys, hills. We're getting into the mountains of the Alps. Northern Germany, flat, level ground, mostly agrarian land. So for 30 years, off and on, almost continuously, this battle goes on, back and forth through northern Germany. Consequences, huge loss of population, lots of hunger, because this is the agrarian land, and you're fighting battles in it. So if you can plant, it gets trampled in the fight, you can't harvest. If you can harvest, your town, your village gets burned, and there goes all of the stores you have. So lots of depopulation as a result of the war and as a result of starvation from the effects of the war. By the time this is over, the northern German towns and villages are basically like stuck in time. They've made no progress in this 30 years, and they have rebuilding to do on top of that. An incredibly costly war. Remember, peace equals prosperity. For 30 years, Austria and these German princes in Sweden have just been pouring money into this war. 30 years, guys, twice as long as you've been alive, these folks are fighting. That is a long time to fight. In the end, everybody's kind of worn out. Okay? These weren't the only folks involved. The Netherlands, being Protestant, and the Spanish Netherlands, being Catholic, get involved a little bit. Poland, being mostly Catholic, gets involved as well. After 30 years, everybody is worn out. The land is worn out. The people are worn out. The economies can't sustain these nations fighting any longer. It looks towards the end like the Habsburgs just might win. And here comes France to the rescue. Now France, we know from long practice here, is predominantly Catholic. Very good. When France enters the 30 Years' War, then, being Catholic, they come in on the side of northern Germany and the Swedes. What? Wait a minute. They didn't come in on the side of the other Catholic nations, the Habsburgs?
They hate.
Check yourself, Hoke. They don't hate the Habsburgs. They want land, they want power. If they come in on the side of the Habsburgs and the Habsburgs win, are the Habsburgs going to share the spoils with the French? No, they're going to say, we've been fighting for 29.5 years. You Frenchies can take your help and stick it in your ear. You're not getting anything. The Swedes and the Northern German princes, who see that they might be on the losing side here, when the French come in riding to the rescue, are like, oh, thank you! Especially when they end up on the more victorious than losing side. We can't really say there's a winner and a loser here, except for the land and the people of Northern Germany. Definitely losers. Okay? Ultimately, the outcome is kind of weird. For a war that goes on 30 years, you'd think there'd be a definitive victor and defeated. When the 30 Years' War is over, a treaty is negotiated. It is called the Peace of Westphalia. In the Peace of Westphalia, there are some pretty significant things that are determined. Some land changes hands. The Alsace. The Alsace is a region in northeastern France. So here's France, region in northeastern France, southwestern what is today Germany. It would sit right on that border. Okay? Today, Alsace is in France. Over time, the Alsace region, prior to the 30 Years' War, has flipped hands back and forth from German, French, German to French, German to French. So at the end of the 30 Years' War, the French are like, we came in, we conquered, we saved your butts, we get this. And the Germans are like, okay, fine, thank you. We appreciate it. They will come to regret that. And in the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, the Germans will have the goal of taking that back, and they will. And then the French are going to get it back, and then the Germans will get it back, and then the Germans will be forced to give it up, and then the Germans will take it back again. And then we have the end of World War II, where the French get it back, and have held it since then. So you are going to see Alsace over and over and over again. When we see it in relationship to World War I and World War II, we're going to talk about it with another neighboring region, Alsace-Lorraine. Any World War II fans to whom that sounds vaguely familiar? The Alsace-Lorraine? Yeah, Lebensraum?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm talking it.
Okay. It's going to come up a lot. Okay. Sweden gets a few bits of land in northern Germany, but it doesn't really do them any good because it's nowhere near Sweden. And so they don't actually hold on to that stuff for very long. So France gets significant land as a result of Peace of Westphalia. You can pretty much lock into your head that they're the only ones who get land at the end of the 30 Years' War. Okay? Religious self-determination is awarded to these folks. Self-determination, what's that mean? Break it down.
You get to determine it yourself.
You get to determine it for yourself. Paige used words that weren't those. You get to decide for yourself how you worship God.
I didn't say that.
I'm fixing your words in your mouth. All right. So yes, religious self-determination. They get to decide who they, the princes, the local rulers, get to decide. Gee, doesn't that sound awfully familiar? In this respect, the Peace of Westphalia is just like the Peace of Augsburg. Very good. That's excellent. You have been studying. All right. One other big thing. Holland is recognized as an independent nation. Holland is what we're calling the Netherlands. That's the Protestant group that broke off from Spain's Netherlands. So now we have Holland and the Spanish Netherlands. Holland is Protestant. This is where the Pilgrims are going to come from. And then, from this time forward, Switzerland will ever after be its own independent nation. They will not yet claim, oh my gosh, the word just flew out of my head. Neutrality.
Yeah.
They will not yet claim neutrality, but that's coming fairly shortly. So Switzerland is now an independent nation as a result of the 30 Years' War and the Peace of Westphalia. All right, Prussia. Prussia, with a P. P-Russia. Prussia. Prussia is a region. It is not a country per se, because it's always kind of shifting and changing. Prussia is a bunch of northern Germanic princes who get together and say, if we had one leader and we unified, we'd have more power. And so they do. The ruling family of Prussia is the Hohenzollern family. Hohenzollern. You need to know Hohenzollern, as you know, Tudor and Stuart, Bourbon and Habsburg. You need to know what family goes with what country. Okay? Prussia, if you picture northern Germany, okay, cut Germany in half side to side, then cut that top half inside in half north to south, take that northeastern chunk, and then take a good chunk out of Poland. That there is Prussia. Okay? The rest of what is Germany on today's map, you have Bohemia down in the south, in the southeast corner. Okay? And then the rest of it is just loose principalities, small city-states. It's really, not really organized. Okay? Bohemia also expands over into like the western half of the Czech Republic. Prague is actually the capital of Bohemia. Okay? All right. Prussian ruler you have to know. Your book talks a lot about Frederick William I. It mentions him to point out to you what a tyrannical kind of father he was, how he was not going to have any fancy pants behavior on the part of his son. Right? His son, Frederick II, very much likes to play the piano and paint and sing and dance. And Frederick William thought that that was a sissy boy kind of behavior, and he was having none of it. And so he has his son basically thrown in prison in isolation after his son attempted to run away from home. He attempted to leave the country. The Crown Prince attempts to run away. How bad is your dad when you know that you get to rule a country if you stay home and you run away? Can you get a good picture of how miserable life was? So this is not a lifetime movie. When Frederick II is brought home, Frederick William is not like, oh, I have crushed my son's spirit. Son, I love you. Let me hug you. No, Frederick William is like, throw him in jail and arrest the friend who helped him get out of here. And then he pulls his son out of jail to watch personally the beheading of his friend.
Oh, that's cool.
Are you going to run away again?
Nope.
Yeah. No, because I'm throwing you back in isolation, and then I'm putting you in the army, and the army will drum it out of you, because the army does not tolerate sissy fancy pants boys either. When Frederick II becomes the ruler of all Prussia, he is a very effective ruler. So effective that he is given by acclaim of his people the title Frederick the Great. Frederick the Great, Frederick II are interchangeable for you. You do not have to put both down. You need to know that they are the same. Frederick II. There are some characteristics that are traditionally Prussian in nature. If we're talking about a Prussian leader, you can assume that they are highly organized, very regimented. This is how we do things, A, B, C, and done. Strong record keepers, and generally very militaristic. Strong military. The quote that your book gives you, Prussia is not so much a country with an army, but an army that has a country. Yeah, Prussia was all about its army, uniforms, order, pride. We're going to introduce the concept of nationalism before too long here, and Prussia will lead in that by giving its people this sense of pride because we have a big, strong military that makes us strong as a people. Okay? Frederick, at the same time as he is an authoritarian, autocratic, absolutist monarch with a divine right to his throne, okay? Another absolutist divine right monarch, as was his father. As much as he is that way, he also views ruling Prussia as an obligation to his people. Frederick the Great is said to have said that he was the father of his people. He did not mean that literally, he meant it figuratively. That is, my people's problems are mine. If they're hungry, I have to fix it. If they're cold, I have to fix it. And he saw that as his responsibility as the monarch. He took a very paternalistic approach. Paternal is father. So he took a father-like approach. He is a very driven leader. He will achieve his goals. Period. No discussion. Not end of discussion. No discussion. Say jawohl. That's a good Prussian soldier. All right. Austria, neighbor to the south. Ruling family.
Over. Hey, hey.
Enough of the oxycodone with you.
Yeah, I know.
Habsburgs. Very good. Habsburgs. Don't. He's on pain meds. Just let him be. If he could self-soothe by sucking his thumb, he probably would, but that would hurt worse. So. Okay. Well, he's using the other one to take notes like a good boy. All right. Our absolutist divine right ruler here, Maria Theresa. Well, we've mentioned her before. All right. Maria Theresa is the only child of her father, the only surviving child of her father, who's Charles VI of Austria. He's also the Holy Roman Emperor. Now, ain't no woman ever going to be the Holy Roman Emperor, but she can go on to rule Austria. Charles is concerned, though, that she might face some opposition. There have really been only a couple of female monarchs at this point, and they were in England, which is hard to attack anyway, because you got to swim or sail to get there, and they've got that navy, and so nobody really bothered trying to topple Mary or Elizabeth except from within. So, Charles, before he dies, goes to all of the crowned heads of Europe, and he gets them to promise, cross their hearts and hope to die, that they will accept Maria Theresa as the queen, or the empress of the Austrian Empire. And they all, oh yes, absolutely, any daughter of yours can absolutely deserve our respect. Charles is hardly even stiff on his deathbed before they start attacking. Yep, after all, it's just a girl. We can take her. Well, Charles had left his daughter with a pretty strong army. Lots of battle experience, right? From the 30 Years' War. They know how to fight. But Maria Theresa is concerned because this is pretty much the rest of Europe ganging up on her. And that could be problematic. So she runs next door, not to borrow a cup of sugar, but to ask for assistance from Hungary. Now the Hungarians have been a part of the Holy Roman Empire, but they have not been under Habsburg rule. In fact, they've been openly hostile to the Habsburgs. So here stands Maria Theresa addressing the Hungarian nobility. And it's kind of do or die. She recognizes that if she does not win them over, this is the end of her and possibly the Habsburg line. Hundreds of years old. She gives such an impassioned plea that the Hungarians are overwhelmed and they pledge their support. And with the support of Hungary, Maria Theresa and Austria win the War of the Austrian Succession. 8 years it takes to get this all settled. By then she's a pretty experienced empress. She rules with an even hand, but she is again a divine right, absolute monarch. She's going to have a couple children who survive her and are significant in history. Her son Joseph II will rule Austria and be Holy Roman Emperor. Her daughter will be a good political pawn, as daughters often are. Yes, sir?
What happens to, like, who do they marry? Like, what happens to the dude that they decide to marry? The empress?
Her husband, she was already married before her father died, and she was married to a noble. I want to say he's an Austrian noble. I don't think he married her off to the monarch of another country because he knew she was going to be the heir. I'd have to check that. But yeah, he is basically like flunky, like Prince Philip is in England. Just, you know, arm candy for the queen. An escort, somebody to dance with at the ball.
So they don't really have like a title.
No. Well, he had whatever his noble title was, and I'm sure she gave him even more. Lord Protector of the Realm or something. I don't know if that's too British, but something along those lines. Yeah, it's kind of a life of pampering. I mean, you don't have to do anything.
That'd be
I want to
awesome.
see that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
you also remember you don't have everything you have now, and they didn't have bathrooms.
And you might get pretty
You
bored
didn't know.
too, because think about the role as a man, the role that you've been brought up to think that you're going to fulfill, and now you're marrying a woman who is more powerful than you. That could be pretty emasculating and really awkward.
Yeah, weird man.
Very awkward. Very awkward. The same thing arises between Albert and Victoria of England as well, later on. Okay, so the War of the Austrian Succession is over. Oh, I was talking about Maria Theresa's daughter now. Her daughter will be a young woman named Marie Antoinette. It's actually her youngest daughter. She has several, but Marie Antoinette is the one that we know about and is historically significant. Marie is married off to the young Dauphin of France. That's what we call the crown prince in France. She's married off to him because we need to ally these strong Catholic nations. We're going to get over the fact that France stabbed us in the back at the end of the 30 Years' War, and we're going to marry our princess off to them so to tie our bonds together. And in fact, when we get to the French Revolution, by that time, Marie's brother, Joseph II, is on the throne of Austria. And after things look pretty dire, Louis and Marie will attempt to flee with their children to Austria, to the protection of their brother and Holy Roman Emperor. And they're caught at the border, and we'll talk about how they get caught and returned. And so when the French people make the decision to execute their king and their queen, they're not just making a decision just within France. Because there was every possibility, and it actually did happen, that to do so would incur the wrath of the Habsburg Empire, and they would come a-knocking and a fighting. Because Joseph isn't just going to let somebody cut his sister's head off. Especially when he's the emperor of one of the most powerful empires in Europe. You know, just roll over and let them scratch your belly. So we'll talk about that, though. That's coming actually fairly quickly.